Here at Shafer, what we're most proud of is what's inside the bottle. Our wines speak to a place, our estate vineyards here in Napa Valley. They're incredible sites for growing fruit. Each one is unique. The wines speak to a vintage. Every year has its highs and lows, its challenges and its opportunities.
Welcome to Shafer Vineyards.
They speak to our family's commitment to world-class winemaking, a commitment that goes back 40 years. Shafer wines speak to an incredible team, people who show up every day and push every boundary to get closer and closer to an ideal. I'd like to invite you to try these wines made with authenticity, passion, and care.
Well, good morning, Mr. Shafer. Can I call you Doug today?
Please call me Doug. Thank you.
Well, welcome to the podcast of Wijnimport Bart. We're very thrilled and honored to have you here, of course. One of the reasons that we can talk now is that you were actually planning to come to Holland, and on the 12th of March. So just before the closure in Holland, we closed the 15th of March all the restaurants. And on the February 10th, you said to us, "I'm not going to come," and we were going February 10th. Nobody's talking about this whole crisis yet, so who knows? But what does this no man know that we don't know? But okay, we took it. But I hope we can do this in the future, to do it live.
We will do it in the future, and I don't apologize, but I do apologize. I remember that time. It was very unsettled. We were very concerned, my staff and myself, my sales director who travels, and we'd actually taken a couple trips together to Washington and Dallas in late January, and things were starting to kind of buzz. And we were both scheduled to go to Provine, which is great because in 3 days we see 10 or 15 importers from around the world. So it's a very efficient way to go. And he and I were talking and going, Provine, because we were there last year, it's a lot of people, and this thing, I just don't think we should go. And part of my trip to Provine was going to go see you guys for 2 or 3 days. And so early on, we decided, oh no, I know what it was, because it was like if we wanted to get a refund on our hotel, I'm basically really a cheap guy. So to get a refund on our hotel is like, that was the date, mid-February, where we had to cancel the hotel to get our money back and our plane fare. So we made the call, and he was going to go down and see a couple of folks in Germany, another importer. So we had to cancel mine to you guys and him to Germany and Provine. And we were like, naturally you guys were disappointed, and I get it. And then, 2 weeks later they canceled Provine. So, and everything shut down. So I guess we got lucky on that one. I wish I didn't get lucky on that, to tell you the truth, but oh well.
It was a very good program, and I'm sure we're going to repeat it.
We will
in the future. Because just quickly about Corona, because what do you do with your clients? Because you got this the Shafer flyby, things like that.
Right.
What is that you do?
So people here in Napa are doing different things, different wineries, because there's different levels of openings and closings and infection rate. And we shut it down probably a week before. We closed to the public about a week before our governor said everybody needs to close. And I sent everybody home. So currently, here's what's going on. We've got the vineyards operation is normal, and the vineyard guys are working. They wear masks. They work socially distant apart. They've been great with that. So vineyard growing grapes is something we can continue to do, and we have been. In the cellar, Elias and his team of 3 guys in the cellar have continued to work to bottle wine, to rack wine. We're getting prepped for harvest. Again, they're wearing masks, and unfortunately in the winery and the cellar operations, people are pretty far apart all the time anyway. So those 2 operations are normal. Now then you jump over to the office hospitality side, it's totally strange. So the front door is locked, no visitors. My staff is working mostly from home. we've got a team of 4 or 5 people in the administration end, in sales, and they come in. Oh, they'll come in once or twice a week for 4 or 5 hours to do things they need to do here, but then they'll work from home also. So it's kind of strange because I'm here every day, all day, and I'm alone most of the time, and it's just weird. But we've tried to accommodate folks. We do these virtual flyby tastings where someone can have a Zoom gathering with 5 or 6, 10, 15 of their friends and invite us in, and we'll sit right here. We've made a little studio here with a really good camera, and we can taste wine with them and talk and answer questions. I've got a couple guys and myself. We take turns doing that. I've done sales meetings with distributors, with sales team people. They're all in their own homes, and they don't necessarily have the wines to taste, but at least we can describe it and tell the Shafer story. And a few weeks ago, we opened up for curbside purchases. If people want to buy wine retail, they can call us up and drive into the parking lot, and we'll bring the wine out to their car, and a touchless experience if they want to buy some wine. It's kind of funny. So we build it as this curbside, call up, order some wine, come by, pick up a couple bottles, a case, whatever. And one gal, I guess, called up the other day and said, "Hey, I'm in your parking lot. Can we buy a couple glasses of any white wine you have?" And so they want us to bring out 2 glasses of wine to them. It's like, no, you don't understand. It's not that deal. I thought that was funny.
But it's a very Shafer that you make a link to your father to call it the Shafer flyby.
Yeah, of course. I mean, my dad, he's the one that moved us out here from Chicago 40 years ago and started this whole operation. But he was a B-24 pilot in World War II, and so we call it these virtual things the flyby in honor of him and his piloting days.
Because, well, of course, we're going to get to your father and the whole story. But the only thing, there's a lot of material out there about Shafer. But the real reason why he went to Chicago to Napa, that's something I couldn't really find in all these stories. Like, why was Napa the place? Because he could have gone to anywhere.
Well, great question. Yeah, and it's a story we never really published. I tell it in person all the time. But what happened was, I grew up in Chicago. This was for 17 years. He worked for a book publishing company. He published textbooks. And it's funny because years later, when the wine business was starting to boom, he laughed and he said, this reminds me of the quote, education publishing business back in the 60s. I said, why is that? Because that's what he published textbooks for schools. And he said, because in the 60s, all the baby boomers were in elementary school and high school. So there's this incredible population of kids in school, the baby boom generation, at least in our country. So education and publishing materials was like the hot ticket. It was like really cool. There's cutting edge stuff and reading programs and math programs. And he was right in the middle of that. And, but it was funny back in when like in the 90s, when the wine thing really took off for us and in this country, he equated that to the publishing thing in the 60s. But anyway, he started out selling textbooks and he worked his way up. He was with this company for 22 years. And he ended up in what they call long-range planning. So long-range planning was kind of a job where his job was to read the tea leaves. In other words, what's the newest thing? Like today, I wouldn't even know what the newest thing is today. It's definitely not Twitter or Instagram, but it's TikTok or something. You would know, I don't. But that was his job, what's coming? And he came across all sorts of things. And at the time, there were 2 big ones that he kept coming across. One was videotape. Well, videotape is the birth of technology. And, it used to be these big video cameras that were like this big. And then now it's become this, Yeah. And that was the technology thing. This is late 60s, early 70s. That was going to boom. Most of you out there, I've lived most of my life without a cell phone anyway. And the other thing he came across was articles kept talking about this pending wine boom in California. And he kept coming across this, like, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. What you need to know, it'll kind of blow you away, was my dad was not a wine drinker. Bourbon, beer, martinis. if there was ever wine in our house in Chicago at a dinner party, I think it was like Lancers or Mateus, something like that. Was not a wine guy, because people run into me sometimes and say, "Oh my God, your dad, he dream come true. He got to go out and, you know, he probably loved wine and he went out and got to make wine and the whole thing." It's like, no,
But he was an
did it as,
entrepreneur, though.
he was an entrepreneur. He did it as an investment. So he came out here to check out this wine boom, ended up buying this old funky vineyard right here in what's now, you know, it's the heart of Stag's Leap. It was a dumpy little house, a tractor shed, 30 acres of grapevines that were 60 years old, a field blend of Zinfandel, Carignan, Petit Syrah, just a mess. And he bought it. This was in 72, I think. And his plan was to be an absentee owner for 10 years, retire early, come out and be a grape grower, you know, just retire and be a grape grower. And within 6 months, I think he got so frustrated at work. Oh, I forgot one part of the story is, at work, he went to his bosses and said, "We got to go technology. This is what's coming. We're producing educational materials. We got to do this tech stuff." And they said, "No, that's too newfangled. You know, we'll stick with the workbook and the reader." So he was very frustrated at that publishing company because he knew, you know, they were missing the boat. And then he got totally turned on by this whole idea of growing grapes. So within 6 months, he moved us out. January 73, out we came. He was 48, I was 17.
Okay, he was 48. Okay, that's
Yeah.
You,
So that's the reason why. It was mostly just, it was an investment. You know, he was looking to entrepreneur.
and you joined in 1983.
I
as
did.
a winemaker.
Yes.
And your father, it was still small then, maybe 12 hectares.
Oh, we were probably, it was the home ranch here, which is 50 acres. That's like 20 hectare, I think. And then we just purchased another 10 hectare. So it's pretty small. We were probably making about 5,000 or 6,000 cases back then.
And the first release was 81. So it's only 2 years after the first release that you joined the company.
Right. In 81, he released his first wine. It was a 1978 Cabernet. So that was our first vintage, was 78. He released it in 81, and then I came on board in 83.
So, but when was the step that you sort of thought, we have to start moving in a different direction? You know, there is a certain time, a certain, not just volume, but also a vision of what you want to do. When did that time came that you went, I have to go out, or I have to start thinking about branding Shafer?
Well, that was, you know, Roderick, that's a good question. There was never like a silver bullet aha moment. It was more just the process. I mean, it was really kind of fun. I'm working next to Dad, side by side. I'm in the cellar making wine, just a one-man show, and then I got Elias, two-man show. And I'm just totally absorbed in trying to make good wine because I was really, really young and green and didn't know it all. And I was full-time in the cellar, not even thinking business or branding or anything. I was just trying to make wine that was okay. And we were making Chardonnay, we were starting to make Merlot and Cabernet. I wasn't thinking about case production or anything like that. I mean, you know, Dad was running the show. And so he was running the business and marketing and sales. And I do remember one thing. It was probably it was probably early on in the mid 80s. All of a sudden he'd leave a book on my desk. You know, he said, "You need to read this. You need to read this." And they were branding books, you know, about brand. And so he said, "We need to go have a long lunch. I want to talk to you about this. This is what this is all about." And I was like, "Holy shit, this is cool." He goes, "Yeah. So he was the driving force. He really was." I remember because we had some meetings with a couple other people we were working with and brainstorming, what does Shafer mean? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? How can we set ourselves apart, you know, in the marketing world? And there was this book called Guerrilla Marketing. It's still out there, probably 2 or 3 editions. And it's basically, how do you market yourself or your brand as unique, as separate, as different, and also maybe do it without having to spend $1 million because we didn't have it. And it's just little things.
If you, sorry if I interrupt.
No, it's fine.
I mean, of course, in the time of, say, 83, 84, if you taste, say, 20 wines from Napa, there were only a couple of that you thought, well, maybe that's all right. But if you, how does that go from that point to try to achieve or creating the high quality that you make now? Is it truly an organic process?
It's, you
Or do
know,
you have to
something.
make
It came from having some absolute disasters
in '86 or
in wines that I actually inherited wines that were a mess from my predecessor. Got them fixed up pretty good, bottled them, sold them. Thought I was pretty hot stuff. Elias was on board. He probably did too, because we were, you know, young and dumb, but that's okay. And then I had I had a disaster myself. I had a couple wines right at the same time that were flawed. And I had to rebottle them. And rebottling sounds exactly like it sounds. It is exactly what it sounds. You pull the corks and dump the wine back into a tank and fix it and rebottle it. And going through that experience, let me tell you, I would never wish that on anybody, because sleepless nights and self-doubt, and I screwed up and I'm screwing up the family business and the whole thing. And Dad stood behind me and said, "That's okay, let's get through this." And we got some help, figured it out. And at that point, it was like, man, this is never going to happen again. Not only that, we're going to make really damn good wine. And I want to make wine just as good as those people across the street, because they were making good wine. You know, a couple of wineries nearby here. And we'd have blind tastings like, man, if we could just be as good as those guys. And all of a sudden you turn around 4 or 5 years later, and it's like, hey, we're better than those guys. And it's like, hey, we can get even better, because we were learning, you get more experience. And every year you make wine, you learn more, you try new things. So it was a process, and it took 8 or 10 years. My first vintage here was '83. And I'll tell you right now, we had some fine wines in the '80s, but Elias and I really started hitting it in the like '90, '91 vintage. That's when it's like it all came together after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So it was, there was no silver bullet. It was a long, hard slog. And just like anybody in any business out there, you guys have all had your own experiences, and you know, and you learn by your mistakes. I hate to say it, it's a drag because it's no fun going through it. But there you have it.
Was it still called the Shafer Reserve back then, or was it already called Stags Leap?
Well, the '82, we had, when I got here, I inherited the '82 vintage, and that's when he had started to purchase some grapes and cab. So all of a sudden we had, there was this one tank of Sunspot Cabernet, which was really, really good. And I said, Dad, we got to keep this separate. Let's keep it separate and call it Reserve. So we had an '82 Reserve, which was Sunspot Cabernet, which was the predecessor to Hillside Select. So in '83, we changed the name from Reserve to Hillside Select, and basically that program started to select the best grapes from our Hillside vineyards and bottle that separately as a separate wine, Hillside Select. And then meanwhile, we had our, quote, Napa Valley Cab, regular cab, which is morphed into 1.5 today. Okay.
Just for our listeners, if they don't know where Stags Leap exactly is, where is it situated in Napa?
So Napa Valley is about 50 miles from San Francisco as the crow flies. And Napa's at the city of Napa, town, if you will, is at the southern end of the valley. And the valley goes, it's about 30 miles long, which is how many hectares? That's about, come on, 15, 20, I don't know, guys. I should know this. I'm traveling Europe. I'm so bad at this. No, it's not hectares, it's kilometers. Anyway, but it's about 30 miles long and 5 or 6 miles wide at its widest point. It's a fairly small area, the Napa appellation. And within that appellation, there are sub-appellations. And we're right in what's called the Stags Leap District. Stags Leap District is about 10 miles north of Napa on the east side of the valley. It's about 2 miles long and a mile wide, a fairly small sub-appellation, and it's best known for Cabernet and the Bordeaux varietals. Merlot, Petit Verdot, Malbec, Cab do really well in this area. We are kind of the southern half of the Napa Valley, so it's a little cooler than up north in St. Helena and Calistoga. So we get cooler nights, cooler mornings, which is great for retaining natural acidity in the grapes, which helps a lot.
Because in '89 you fought, or your father fought really hard to get an AVA for Stags Leap.
Right.
Why was that so important?
Well, I think they always, back in those days, they talked about, oh, down there in the Stag's Leap area, because we have this, pardon me, this big mountain behind us called the Stag's Leap Palisades. And he got together with a few neighbors, and they petitioned the U.S. government to form the sub-appellation. And I think it was two reasons. Basically, to identify this is a kind of a special spot for Cabernet, and the Cabs tend to have a similar characteristic here as opposed to other areas in Napa. And that's usually rich fruit and soft tannin. And it was also good, for the wine lovers out there. They really, when you're into it, you get into it, and you want to know where that certain vineyard. Think about the Burgundy thing. Holy cat! Oh my God. I haven't tried. I just know it costs too much money, but it's really good. And so it's just that step because we were, again, know it or not, we were branding and becoming unique, and the quality was getting such that we could be on the world stage with the top Cabernets in the world. I mean, at the time, that was kind of like, oh man, that'll never happen to us. But it's like, it's happened. And to the wine lovers out there who are into it, they like to know where grapes are sourced from in wines. And that helped. It helps with marketing too. Again, set yourself apart. Stag's Leap District, special place.
Okay, we'll get, of course, to the wines, but the Hillside Select, it's not the name of the vineyard, huh?
No, it's the home ranch here in Stag's Leap. We have about 55 acres of grapes, mostly hillside vineyards, different blocks. Some are 1 to 2 acres. Some can be about 6 or 7 acres. And they different clones, different rootstocks, different exposures to the sun and the east, west, south, north exposures. And basically what we do every year is we pick the best grapes from these hillsides to make this blend called Hillside Select. So we select the best Cabernets from this different hillside blocks. And we know it so well, we usually know before we pick.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, this is just by Elias and I sampling, it tastes like, wow, this one's really good. This is going to be Hillside, which is kind of cool.
And one of the other major vineyards is the Borderline Vineyard.
Borderline, that's a 25-acre vineyard just south of us, about less than a mile. And it's right on the southern edge of the Stag's Leap District border. That's why we call it Borderline. And it's a great Cabernet vineyard. It's not hillside, it's flat land, but we farm it well. And those grapes go into our 1.5 Cabernet.
And is that Borderline vineyard one of the reasons that you went to looking at different plants and herbs in the vineyard to control vigor and things like that?
Yeah, it's the use of cover crops. It was when we bought the site years ago. It's a very fertile site. I remember we were doing you're doing your diligence. You're digging soil pits to check out the soil and the water availability before you buy the thing, and soil testing. And it's like we were down there with a backhoe digging these soil pits, and it's like I'm watching them. It's like 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet. Holy shoot, there's 15, 20 feet of topsoil. It's like on this home ranch right outside my window here, where the winery is, our hillsides, you got maybe a couple, 3 feet maybe a foot and a half of soil, and then you got rock and bedrock. So I'd never seen anything like this. This was a flatland alluvial site with 15 feet of topsoil. I was like, holy cats, how are you going to grow good grapes in this stuff? It's too fertile.
Yeah.
So I went to my guys. I had my vineyard guy and David and Elias, my winemaker. They're still here. This was over 20 years ago. And they were like, come on, Doug, come on, let's buy it. Go, man, go. It's like, I'm cutting the check. They're not. And I said, all right, fellas, I'll buy it. But before I cut the check, by the end of the day tomorrow, you need to give me a plan on how you're going to grow top quality Cabernet in this amazingly fertile site. So they walked in the next day and they had it. They said, we're going to put in, first of all, drain tile. Drain tile, which will basically, underneath the soil, it drains the soil moisture out of the soil, so there's no excess left over from the winter rains. That way you control the moisture by irrigating or not irrigating. So drain tile number one. We're going to plant low vigor rootstocks. So rootstocks have low vigor. They won't go crazy. We're going to have close row spacing, 6 feet rows instead of 7 or 8. So there's more vines per acre, more vines per hectare. That's more competition. That keeps the growth from being too vigorous, because too much vigor is bad. And that was the issue with this site. And they said also then we're going to keep planting cover crops, which we do anyway for sustainability. But cover crops, which is planting vetch and oats and things, plants that grow during the winter in between the vine rows, and they grow throughout the winter and in the spring, and you mow them or you plow them under, depending. But what you can do with cover crops on a site like that is keep them growing longer as the grapes start to grow. So those cover crops compete for nutrients and moisture. In other words, compete to keep the grapevines from going crazy. So all those 4 or 5 things you put together, and we have a vineyard on a very fertile site. You're going to love this. The shoots are only 2 or 3 feet long, which is what we want, which is what we have up here in the hillsides. The crop, it never sets we don't let it set a big crop. We prune it accordingly. And by the time we pick those grapes, those vines are kind of like on their last legs, which is kind of what you want, just as far as getting small berries, concentration, flavor, aroma.
But it's a very different mindset, that's for sure.
Yeah. But see, in the same venue, I could take that vineyard and, we could hang and get, we usually get 3 to 4 tons per acre off that thing. Good quality, but we could probably get 6, 7 tons per acre off that thing. And quality would be fine, but it wouldn't be as good as we want. So it's a balance for sure.
Yeah. But is it because when did you move that the sustainability is very important? You're one of the first one who were running on solar power and other things. When did that start?
We started doing that pretty early. The whole cover crop thing I got into in the 89, 90, a long time ago. John Williams at Frog's Leap is a good friend, and he's wonderful at it. So he kind of he bent my ear one time, and I kind of jumped on board. So using cover crops is a natural way to fertilize the vineyard. Also, it adds a bunch of organic components back in, which is great for the soil. You avoid using herbicides. You use cover crops, a natural habitat for good bugs, which can eat the bad bugs, which you used to have to spray for. So that was great. We went to 100% solar power in 2004. We recycle all our winery water that we use in the cellar and treat it in a wastewater pond and use it to irrigate the vineyards. It goes on. And we, songbirds, they eat bugs. I think they eat everything. And then we compost. I'm still not sure about those guys. We compost all our grape stems and skins at harvest and use that to fertilize. We bring in the sheep. The sheep's a good one. Have you seen my video on the sheep, Roderick? Oh God, you're gonna love this. You gotta YouTube it. This is the pandemic move. So the last 3 or 4 years, we bring in sheep, like 200 sheep in late February, right before the vines start to grow. And we let them loose, it's really cool operation. So they eat the cover crop. They mow it down so we don't have to drag a tractor through to do it. Plus, which is great. And they're so cute. And this year, I've got a wonderful creative guy who works with me, and he said, I got an idea. I go, what? He goes, well, I keep reading about these people stuck in their apartments in the pandemic, and there's these YouTube videos of like a fireplace burning. So if you've got this big TV screen in your apartment, you're stuck in the house, you can put the fireplace on, so it just kind of runs. So it's like, it's kind of nice. I said, what? He goes, I'm going to do a sheep thing. I said, what? He goes, so we got this video guy, and he did 3 or 4 hours of sheep, just sheep, grazing. And you can hear the birds, you can hear the sheep going, ba, ba. There's a little baby with its mom. And we spliced it together, and it's 6 hours. 6 hours of sheep grazing at Shafer Vineyards. And we put it on YouTube, and it's got like 2 million hits. And people were, this all happening, late March, early April. People were like, oh, thank God the sheep. I'm stuck at home all day. It's my screensaver now. But go onto YouTube and look up Shafer Sheep, and you'll see it. You got to check it out.
Yeah, no,
but you don't have to watch through all 6 hours. It'll kill you.
No. But I'll put it on my TV because it sounds like a lot of fun. Right. You're not the only son.
No, I have an older sister. I had an older brother who passed away 20 years ago, and then a younger brother. So
And
there were
why was
four
it you
total.
that went to work in the winery?
Well, what happened was when we moved out here, I was 17. My older two siblings were in college. He didn't start the winery right away. This was in 73. So
Yeah.
he didn't really get the winery going until 1978, 80s when he built the winery. So by that point, my older siblings were off in other careers. And you have to remember something. The beginning of Shafer Vineyards was not what Shafer Vineyards is today. It wasn't this hot, big, famous place. It was just like, okay, a couple thousand cases, no big deal, you know, not making money. And when we moved out here, I got exposed for a year and a half living in Napa Valley from Chicago, and I fell in love with it. And I also was here long enough to see Dad working with consultants, irrigation guys, vineyard guys, how to plant a vineyard, replant a vineyard. And I was looking around because I was thinking about college and what to do. And I saw these guys, and they're wearing blue jeans and work shirts, and they're working out of their trucks, and they're outside. I was like, because I grew up seeing Dad, you know, catching a commuter train to Chicago every day in a suit and tie. And it was like, I want to do this. So I actually went to UC Davis to study viticulture and plant science to be a farmer. And as I went through, I took some enology, some winemaking, but that was kind of the direction I took. I had no concept or no idea about working with Dad at all because Dad was just growing grapes. So I just wanted to do my own thing. In college, I decided I really wanted to teach school. So even though I got the degree in viticulture and enology, I stayed another year, got a teaching credential. I actually went down to Tucson, Arizona, right near Mexico, right near where he's trying to build a wall. I'm sorry, we're not supposed to get political, are we?
No, I'm very happy to do it, but
we won't. It's not worth it. Life's too short. We're having too good a time. Anyway, I taught junior high school for 2 years and loved it. I had a lot of fun doing it, but also realized long term that's not what I wanted to do. And I really was pulled back to the wine business. And this was 1980, 81. So Dad had built a winery. So that thing was kind of starting to happen, but he hadn't released a wine yet. And I'll never forget, this is a great story. I'll never forget, I was at home at Christmas. I was still in Tucson teaching, home for a couple of weeks. I said, Dad, I think I'm going to stop teaching this year, second year, and come back to the wine business, you know, grape growing or whatever. And he said, just letting him know. And he goes, well, I don't have a job for you. I was like, Robert, it was like, what? I was totally stunned. I was, because I had no idea or no yearning to come work with my dad. None at all. So I said, no problem. I don't want to work with you. You know, you're my dad. So I came back, and because he had a winemaker at the time, they were already starting off. And I came back and got a cellar job at another winery, and was fine for a couple of years. And then we went. Huh?
Was that in Napa?
Yeah, it was in Napa. It was just
okay.
right 2 miles from Shafer. But I was doing my own thing, and I was working in a cellar and learn how to run a cellar. It was a good experience.
Because, well, it's sort of an introduction to your Chardonnay. I don't know, a couple of things I don't understand that I would like to ask about it, because your father went to Tuscany, right?
Yes.
In the 80s or 90s. And he came back, he drank the Super Tuscans and stuff like that, and he told you, okay, let's plant Sangiovese. And you all probably went like, Sanjo what? And anyway, you planted Sangiovese there. And
yep.
The thing is, because you went to Carneros, because you made Chardonnay in Napa before, you went like, oh, this is not really the way to go. You went to Carneros, so, and then you made all the decisions on, first of all, planting, but now also how you make the wine, because you have to. Was there a region or a producer that you said made the link to you that you did do maybe high density planting, clone selection? Where did you go to say this is the style or this is what I want to achieve eventually?
Roderick, you're right in the thick of it. You're right here in the Napa Valley, Sonoma Valley. You're living and breathing wine. You're making it, you're crushing it, you're making it, you're aging it, you're bottling it. Your social life is, I was in at least one tasting group for years with other winemakers, meet every 2 weeks and blind taste Chardonnays, blind taste this. You're talking to each other. You've got a couple buddies and you're learning all the time. So you're on the phone with your 2 or 3 winemaker buddies, not everybody, but we all had 2 or 3 that are our pals. Say, you know, I got a problem with this one. Can you come taste this? Yeah, what do you think? I think it's this. I think it's that. Let's figure it out. Let's figure it out. It was just crazy cool. And I'm out of the winemaking gig these days because, you know, Elias is doing that. And I'm not sure if that energy is still there. It probably is. But back then it was crazy cool because we were just everybody was just trying to make good wine. And we didn't have all the answers yet. And people would make mistakes. And Chardonnay for us, we had Chardonnay planted here on the home ranch in the beginning because Dad, in his mind, wanted to have a winery. I never knew about that till later. Either did my mom. And we had 10 acres of Chardonnay right here in Stag's Leap. It was decent. When I got over here, we still had it. We were making Chardonnay from that. It was a good wine. And then we started increased production. And here's what happened. I found a grower. I kept hearing about this guy named Larry Hyde in Carneros, south of Napa. Cool region, great place to grow Chardonnay and Pinot. And I went down there and saw him, and nice guy. And we were talking. He goes, "Yeah, I sell to about 15 wineries." And he started, you know, Gurgich Hills, Dave Ramey, Matanzas Creek. I mean, all these top Chardonnay producers. I said, "You got any left over?" He goes, "Yeah, I got 10 tons I can sell you next year." I said, "Great." Well, I hit it off with him, and I bought grapes from him for a long time, you know, up to 20, 25 tons. And you kept his grapes separate when they came in. We compared it to our Chardonnay grown here in Stag's Leap, and another vineyard I bought in Oak Knoll. And his wine, the wine from his grapes was head and shoulders above everything else. So we'd always heard that Carneros is better for Chardonnay, and it was. I saw it firsthand. So at that point, with Elias and Dad, it's like we need to buy a vineyard in Carneros to plant the Chardonnay of our own, so we can do it, and that's what we did. So, when did we buy that vineyard? 1988. We bought the vineyard and started planting it in 1991. We had some drought years, and first harvest was 94. And that's when we dubbed the wine Red Shoulder Ranch. We named the ranch Red Shoulder after the Red Shoulder hawks. Oh, but the hawks are part of the sustainable thing. They eat the gophers and the moles in the vineyard. But that was the story of how we ended up getting a Carneros vineyard for Chardonnay. It was a great move. And that was 88, early 90s. So that's right when people were starting to figure out. My experience personally at Shafer and Napa, I think kind of mirrors what happened in Napa in general over these last 30 years. In the 80s, we weren't doing a lot in the vineyard. It was all winemaking. It was like, how can we make decent wine? How can we make better wine? How can we make wine that won't blow up in the bottle? I mean, I don't mean to sound silly, but it's just kind of like, and do it every year. So the emphasis was on winemaking. And as here at Shafer, as we kind of figured that out, like I said, we started making solid wines in 1991. Then the attention turned to the vineyard. The other reason it turned to the vineyard right around late 80s, early 90s, because we had phylloxera. Phylloxera hit big, and this whole valley had to be probably 80% of it had to be replanted in a 4 or 5 year period. So now you have the opportunity to plant a new vineyard. So all of a sudden it's like, plant the right grape in the right place. If you're in Stag's Leap, you should be planting a Bordeaux varietal, not Chardonnay. If you're planting in Carneros, you should be planting Chardonnay and Pinot. And then there's rootstock to use and irrigation and row spacing and all that stuff. So phylloxera, the silver lining on phylloxera was like a lot of vineyards got torn out 5, 10, 15, 20 years before they would have been torn out. So people had a chance to restart and get the right grape in the right place sooner, which actually equated to having better wines sooner, which got us on the world stage sooner.
Is it also the period that the Riesling sort of disappeared from Napa?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. It was too hot. It's too hot. Jesus, I would love to make, you know what? There's two things I want to make, baby. Riesling,
And
grown in the right place near you, and
yeah.
Chablis. I want to make Chablis, baby. I want to make Chablis. I love Chablis. I drank a half a bottle last night. So good.
But there is I think wasn't there an old lady somewhere in the top of Napa? You had to go through the drive through these trees with red velvety scar, and I forgot her name. And she only made a white wine.
Eleanor McRae, Stony Hill.
Yes,
Is that one?
that was
Stony,
pretty close to Chablis.
Stony Hill. Yeah, they made a great steely, lean Chardonnay. They did, and they also made Riesling, or else they still do, I think. But yeah, very famous wine. Probably one of the first famous Chardonnays in Napa, but it was way far away from Carneros, but it was up in the hills and cooler. Good for look at you. Look at you. You know your Napa wines. Look at you.
No, I went there once.
Okay.
And I met her and I said, "Can I buy some wine from you?" And she said, "Well, I've been in Amsterdam in 1968, and it was the first time my husband kissed me. So yes, you can buy. As a Dutchman, you're allowed to buy," because she didn't have anything, like nothing. So I got 60 bottles or something like that of the Chardonnay, and I took it. And
yeah, Eleanor McRae, Eleanor and Fred.
She's not alive anymore, huh?
No, she's not alive. Great. They're a great family.
Yeah, I'm sure. It was really nice. But going back to the Red Shoulder range, because at the time, I'm sure when you started doing it, you still did malolactic. You didn't do whole bunch press, things like that. So
yeah, at the time we didn't whole cluster press, but we've never done malolactic with Chardonnay. Never have. Ever since 1980, our first Chardonnay. So the Red Shoulder Ranch, it's Carneros Vineyard, small clustered clones, get a lot of flavor, 4 or 5 different clones, which are really, really tasty. Whole cluster press it, juice comes right into the cellar, straight to barrel. We barrel ferment. It's about 75% French oak barrels, 25% stainless steel barrels.
Yeah.
And we ferment, we leave the wine in those barrels. The reason we use the stainless percentage is to minimize the oak. It used to be 100% French oak, and it was too much. The wine would just be too cloying, too heavy.
Have you used American oak as well?
No, just French for everything. Yeah, for the Chardonnay. And then no malolactic, that keeps the acid. Because here's the deal on malolactic. The good thing is it fattens up the mouth of a Chardonnay. The negative, in my opinion, it's my opinion, is it drops acid and it drops fruit. And with our Chardonnay and white wine, I mean, even though Carneros is cool, compared to Burgundy, it's still pretty warm. Yeah. And so I don't want to lose any acidity. I got to keep that. So we avoid malolactic, keeps the fruit up, the acid up, and then we age in the barrels and we age on the lees and we stir the lees, and that helps make the wine a little creamier in the mouth. So now I've got a rich mouth, but I still got good acid and fruit. And that's the recipe. You can make this at home.
And some wild yeast as well. Is that?
Yeah, we start with natural yeast for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Because you got I mean, you know your wines. I've got this wine, this 2017 here, and then of course I can say, well, this will be great in 5 or 7 years. But what is your experience? When is the peak?
Well, Roderick, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm a young wine guy because my whole palate was shaped with young wines tasting in the cellar. And only in the last 8 or 10 years, I've become to really appreciate aged wines, which I do greatly now, but it took me a long time. And our Chardonnay, I like it. Boy, I like it right out of the chute, and, for 2 to 3 years, 1 to 2 to 3 years. After that, to me, it gets a little bit tiring. Some people would prefer it 3 and 4 and 5 years old. Again, it's a matter of taste. So it's everyone's got to find their own window and go for it. But with white wines, I like them young and fresh and perky.
Shiraz. Is it Syrah for you?
Syrah for us, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because It is a project by Elias. He was one. Was there a lot of Shiraz planted in that area back then?
There's not a lot of Syrah here, and there hasn't been. And actually, the market in this country for Syrah is fairly limited. It's the public here. I think it's because Syrah can be made in lots of different styles, so the consumer is not sure what they're getting. Is it going to be light and fruity? Is it going to be heavy and massive? So I think there's some hesitation there. But that's changing slowly. But not a lot of Syrah planted in Napa. But we started this back in, when was it? 99 was the first vintage. But yes, it's a blend of Syrah and Petite Syrah, bit of a crazy idea. And the blend is usually about 90% Syrah, 10% Petite Syrah. And we named the wine Relentless to honor Elias and his relentless pursuit of quality. He is a quality guy, and everything's. This place is clean as a whistle.
But is it not like, because it is a weird idea of to add Petite Syrah to a great wine like that? Isn't it when the vineyard will become older and older that you just lower the percentage of the Petite Syrah?
Well, actually, that's true. We did. In the beginning, it was more of an 80-20 blend, and over time, it's like, geez, let's back off the Petite a little bit and have that Syrah shine through. And we've done that, and we're happy with that 10% range because the Petite gives it a little blueberry kick. It gives it some color and gives it a little bit more of a briary tannin, which we actually like with that because it blends so well with the Syrah. We think it blends really nicely because Syrah, you get that, that earthy, smoky bacon fat aroma and some really good bright fruit. And then that Petite just kind of, percentage marries well with it. So we like it a lot.
Because you co-ferment it, is it ripe at the same time?
Some of it's co-fermented, some of it's separate. That decision gets based on ripeness. Okay. Some of it gets ripe at the same time, some doesn't. But the priority is to pick each grape when it's ripe. So if it's the same time, great. If not, no worries.
Because it's the temptation to make a big wine out of this is probably quite large. So you have to find your restraint. I mean, it's still a big wine.
It's still a big wine. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You're not messing around here. It's Relentless is you're definitely having a glass of serious red wine.
Yeah. And it's all French oak as well, eh?
It's all 100% French oak, 100% new, and quite a while, 30 months in barrel, because it takes that long to tame it down, soften it up.
Are there any personal Shiraz wines in the world that you think, yes, that's really what I enjoy? There is so much.
Oh, there's so many I enjoy. I mean, I would. I go to Northern Rhone and Côte Rôtie, and I don't know the producers. I can't afford the really, really great ones, but once in a while I'm with somebody who does, which is really fun. But they're just stunning wines. But they're big, and it's interesting. I found at home, I used to grab Syrah fairly often. Sometimes I don't as often, just because it's just a boatload of wine, and on a Tuesday, Wednesday nights, like,
It's not a TV and chip wine, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's more the bear skin and the fireplace stuff.
Yeah.
TD9. Now it's a new in wine from you.
Yes.
But what I would like to know is because you start a new wine, you start from scratch. I mean, you have to tell the story, of course, but where do you start? You're gonna say, okay, we're gonna stop with Merlot. We're gonna make a new one. We're looking around the world, in Western Australia, they're starting to add Malbec instead of Cabernet Franc. Eh? Is that something that you also took with you? But first of all, to the brand or to the name, because you've got all these great names of these things. How do you get to, what is that process? And you come up and say, let's call it like after a tractor. That's the end.
Well, you asked for it. You want the story, baby. You're going to get it. You want it? Okay. So, well, guess what? There wasn't a plan. There wasn't there was no thing of like, we're going to make a new wine. No, not at all. So here's the story. Harvest 2015. I'm in my desk, at my desk. It's 6 in the morning, having a cup of coffee, catching up on emails. It's harvest time. We all start early, work late. Elias comes in, 6:15. He's got a cup of coffee, and we're having our daily check-in. You know, I'm going to go sample here. You're going to sample here. We've got this coming from so-and-so's vineyard. We got to press. I got to get those barrels unloaded. You know, our daily crush thing. It's getting hot. It's getting cold. We got to do this. And it's the 2015 harvest, and it's a short harvest. Crop is way down, and he's not happy. And he's bitching and moaning about Merlot, that we're not going to have enough Merlot grapes because it's coming in so light. So he's complaining, you know, and what are we going to do? Because he's no dummy. He knows if we don't have the tons, we don't have the cases, we don't have the sales. I go to you and you guys say, instead of getting 50 cases of Merlot, you're going to get 30. You're like, don't do that to me. You know, this is our livelihood. So, you know, that's the chain. So I just let him rant and rave because it's halfway through harvest and he hasn't any sleep. You know, he's beat. And he walks out of my office. He's going down the hall. Right before the door slams, I hear him say the following words. He says, you know, if we didn't have to call it Merlot, meaning 75% Merlot, if we didn't have to call it Merlot, I could nail the production every year and it would be a better wine. And he slams the door. And it's like, you know, it's the light bulb moment. It's like, huh, interesting. It's because the point was we could make production numbers if it didn't have to be 75% Merlot, we could use 60% Merlot and add more cab or whatever and get that production number to keep everybody happy, right? So I just kind of filed that away. Harvest finished up. It's about 6 weeks later. Things had calmed down. We're having lunch. I said, hey, Elias, remember that thing you said about making a better wine if you didn't have to call it Merlot, if it didn't have to be 75%? He goes, yeah. I said, you still feel that way? He goes, yeah. I said, show me. He goes, piece of cake. He said, piece of cake. And he disappeared. He went back to the cellar in the lab, and I actually, you know, was back at my desk I was on a phone call with somebody or something like that, and he buzzes me an hour later. He goes, come on over to the lab. So I walk into the lab. He's got 2 glasses of red wine for me and 2 glasses of red wine for him, A and B, blind. They're half full. I know he's cooked up he's cooked up something, you know, taste test. So we taste, smell. He looks at me, I look at it, and I go, glass A, way better nose. I don't know what it is, but man, that nose on A is way better than B. He goes, me too. So then we taste, spit, taste, spit, taste, spit. We're just standing at the counter. We're not real formal with the white tablecloth or anything. We just kind of wing it. And I look at him and I'm waiting because he's got a better palate than I do. Because I'm waiting, I want to see what he says. And he looks at me and he knows I'm doing that. He goes, He goes, you first. I go, God damn it. So I said, okay, listen, it's A. I'm all in on A. Not only the nose, but the mouth is way better than B. And then he said 2 fateful words that changed the future of Shafer Vineyards. He said, me too. Now, what you need to know, in 35 years of working together, the times we have agreed 100% on blending the first time out the chute, in 35 years, maybe 5 times. It's usually, no, you're wrong. I like the other nose better. No, I like this one. No, and we go back and forth, which is a lot of fun. But that was like, and so then at that point, it's like, okay, what's in glass A and what's in glass B? So we, let's take off the tags. And glass A was a blend of like 50, 60% Merlot and some Cab and some Malbec. And glass B was what the 15 or whatever vintage was, what that Merlot was going to be if we bottled it as Merlot. So I looked, and so the blend was better. I looked at him, I said, better wine? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'll be able to do it every year because I got the freedom to blend. There's no constraints. So I said, you want to do it? He said, yeah, let's do it. I said, okay, let's do it. No more Shafer Merlot. We'll make a red blend. I'll have to figure out a name. So I went back in and told my dad and told my sales guy, and they're like, and marketing guy, they're like, what? You can't just do that. I said, no, we're doing it because the bottom line is a better wine. And one of the Shafer stories is we're 33,000 cases. I've been that size for 25 years. Well, I'm not trying to make 1 million cases of wine. I just want to make it good every year and dependable. And so that started a process of, come up with a name and the whole thing. So the name was a challenge because we were on a tight schedule to blend and bottle this thing like in 4 months. And my trademark person was like, you got to nail this name right out the bat so no one protests. And Google was my friend, but we came up with TD9. And so the story with TD9 is basically we honor my dad with it. It's on the back label. And it's basically the story is in 1973, John Shafer went from riding a commuter train in Chicago to driving a TD9 tractor in his Napa Valley vineyard. And so when we got out here in 73, there was this old funky TD9 Caterpillar tractor that Dad used to farm for a long, long time. So that's the story. You got it.
Well, fair enough. But did you already have Malbec planted then?
We did. We'd actually been using, I was buying some Malbec from a grower, and we had started planting it ourselves because we liked it, because we were using it in the Merlot blend. Merlot was like 80% Merlot and 10 Malbec, 10 Cab, something like that at that time for a couple of years. So it kind of morphed that into it.
I was afraid. 1.5. It's not that old either, really, as a wine.
Yeah, first vintage. Gosh, when was the first vintage? 2004. Because we were able to purchase that borderline vineyard in 99, 2000, planted it, got the first good crop in 04. At that point, we had enough Stag's Leap District Cabernet to put Stag's Leap District on the label. For appellation labeling, you have to have 85% of the fruit comes from that appellation. So at that point, it was like, hey, we've got a new version of Cabernet from Shafer, because it's Stag's Leap District. Let's come up with a new name instead of just Napa Valley Cabernet. Because at the time, there was an issue. There was and there still is, an ocean of Napa Valley Cab and an ocean of Napa Valley different producers. It's out there. So again, coming back to marketing, guerrilla marketing, how you set yourself apart. Hey, if we can do it with a name and a story, let's do that. So we call it 1.5. People know what it is now. It took a few years, but that tells the generation story with my father and myself. He started the business late in life, second career. I joined him early. So instead of 2 full generations, it's 1.5. So we call it 1.5. So that's the name of, that's the genesis of the name. But in the early years, there was some big confusion. Everyone thought everyone thought it was Magnums. So a lot of trucking people and warehouse people were very upset with me because, wine buyers would, reject the order because they thought it was Magnums and back and forth. But we've settled that now.
Fair enough. I'm drinking 16. What type of vintage is that?
16 was a beauty, really pretty year. The reason I can say that is I don't remember it. I don't remember the good years. I don't remember. It's the ones where something crazy happens. It rained or got too hot or we couldn't get pickers. I remember those. But 16 was great. Good year. Good year. Good fruit set. Nice crop. Not too big, not too small. Just really, really pretty. So nice year.
Pretty wine as well.
Thank you.
Still very young, very young. But
yeah, it's such a baby.
It's such a baby. But we still have in stock in the Wijnimport Bart, so we'll come and get it and have to try it out because
good.
It's well worth it, that's for sure. Now about Hillside Select, there's so much you can ask and tell, and there's so many written about the wine, and of course the scores that you've received. I'll let you talk about that. But with that wine, when did you sort of start thinking, "Oh, I hit the nail right on the top"?
That's good question. I think it parallels with what I said earlier. We started making it as Hillside Select with the 83 vintage, but, and we, in the late 80s, it was funny. You know, that was a period where it's kind of a little embarrassing to admit this, but, we'd make a really good wine and we didn't know how we did that. And then we'd have a wine that wasn't that good and we didn't know why that happened either. It's like, that's not a really good place to be in, for long-term, continuity and consistency of quality. So it was kind of a funny time. And I've thought about this too. There were a couple of beautiful vintages, 85 and 87 were really pretty years. And Elias was here with me, and but we were pretty green and pretty young. It's like I wish I could have those years over with what we know now, because we'd make some great wines in those years, and we make good wines on it, no doubt. But long answer to your question is right around that 90-91 period, after we'd gone through that rebottling and kind of which was very humbling, and it made us really look at everything with new eyes and really try to get to the bottom of what makes great wine. And so it was that early 90s it started to happen. So it was a lot of fun.
Also the time that you saw your scores going up and up and up every year?
Well, they did go up, which was interesting. But we were finally making better wine, and the scores reflected it. And by the way, I didn't get the scores with some of those wines in the 80s. God, what did Parker give me one year? 82 Reserve, I think he gave it 68 points or 62 or something like that. Yeah. I used to have the quote on my phone. It was a rough quote.
Do you remember when you got your first 100 point?
That was the 2002 Hillside. But I think the 2001 was better. So, I mean, Roderick, points are points, and it's great. Yeah. Listen, I don't mean to make light of them. I appreciate them. I'm grateful for them. I think it's wonderful. It's nice recognition. But I came from a place where we didn't get a lot of good points for a lot of years. I mean, I saw some real low scores. And those were the years where personally and as a company, we made a decision, we're not going to rely on scores to sell our wines. And I'm not going to take the scores personally, because I'll never be able to get through this, because I had 6 or 7 years of bad scores. And so that's why, you can't, it's like criticism and compliments, you can't hang on, let that dictate you in your life, because you'll never make it. So you just have to let that stuff roll off your back and just keep trying to do what you do and try to make the best wines you can. And
somebody enjoys it, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And my wine's not for everybody. I get that, and I'm okay with that. Especially when I travel in Europe, with some of my big reds in the Hillside or the Relentless, in Amsterdam or lunch, some guy might say, oh my God, I can't drink this. This is too much, because he's used to claret or whatever. I don't take that personally. What's cool about the world of wine is you walk into a wine shop, especially now, it's like, what do you want? You've got the world of wines there, and you've got every flavor known to man, every style. And what do I feel like tonight? I feel like a big Relentless Syrah. I feel like a great little, Sancerre tonight. How about a Pinot from New Zealand? How about a big, robust Napa Cab? So the bottom line is the consumer wins big time. Yeah, look at all the choices. So,
are you not sometimes sick of that alcohol question?
Yeah, I don't worry about that one either. Full disclosure. Shaper wines have a lot of alcohol in them. Okay. And again, if you don't like it, it's okay. It's not going to hurt my feelings. We are trying to do what we do best here, and we're in this beautiful area. I'm looking out the window right here. It's a gorgeous morning here in Napa. The sun's out. We get rich, ripe flavors. We get rich, ripeness and higher sugars to get the flavors we need to be that better tasting wine, and we get alcohol along with it. And our challenge is to balance that alcohol with fruit concentration and good acid and good oak. And if you can do that and balance it, yeah, it's a big package, but the goal is, so it's a big package, but is it balanced? And so nothing's sticking out, whether it's acid or oak or alcohol. So I don't worry about it.
I had the same discussion with Johan Henschke from Eden Valley in Australia. And he said, well, what do you want me to do? Make bad wine. Just to keep you happy.
I love that answer. Could you ask him if I can use that answer? What do you want me to make bad wine? That's brilliant.
So
God, I want this. Roderick, I want to come see you. I'm so sick of this. I want to get on a plane. Sorry, I had a moment. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, next time, the idea was to do it next time, to do this, what we do live on stage with all the people around us and do the wine tasting that way. So that everybody can hear you talk about the wine and we can give them a little bit and make it interactive and fun and record it as well, which I'm sure we can still do. But,
that'd be great. That would be fun. I'd like that.
We've done the hour.
Okay.
Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, I'm kind of bummed. You get to go home and drink wine and have dinner. I got to go to work. No, nothing to add. Just it's great to see you. I give my best to your whole team. I remember I visited there. It's been a long, long time, but I had a couple visits there. Yeah, it's a long time ago. So you're at the top of the list when things open up, and they will. I'm optimistic we'll get back to something here at some point. But
sure. And
thank you from your team for taking good care of the Shafer brand. We appreciate it.
For 27 years we do now, I think so. We try to do our best. Thank you very much for coming on our podcast. It was a really great pleasure, and yes, see you soon in Holland.
See you soon. Give my best to Hank.
I will.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bottle of wine, you broke my back and you broke my mind. I gave you 3 good reasons why I can't stay. 3 good reasons, red, white, and rosé. I'm not responsible